I'm Dan Smolin. I built a successful executive career in marketing and communications before becoming a top headhunter and founding my own executive search firm. Now get this, every day, mainstream media runs stories in which old school bosses and thought leaders frame your work and workplace issues in ways that are often divisive and unmeaningful. And that's just crazy. The time has come for you to answer the question, what's your work fit, so that your work and career fit who you are, how you want to live, and what you want your lasting contributions to be. What's your work fit? It answers your questions and tackles the issues that keep you up at night about advancing your career in this time of workplace revolution. So let's get started. Hey, good day, everyone. Dan Smolin from What's Your Work Fit. I hope you are having a great day. I am so excited to start this live show today. It's a truly important topic. We'll get to that momentarily. Just a little bit of housekeeping. Next week, we are going to be talking about the impact on reduced in force or RIFT federal employees. I am based in the DC area. It's been a huge impact so far. And there are a lot of people out there who are suddenly out of work and don't know how to move forward. We're going to address their concerns and hopefully provide them with some actionable strategies. Our guest is going to be Mika Cross. She is an expert on the federal workplace and on worker engagement in the federal workplace. I hope you will join us 1 week from today. Okay, before we get to our guest today, I'm hoping that if you haven't done so already, you follow us on LinkedIn and YouTube. Follow and subscribe there. This is where you can watch What's Your Work Fit live. You can also watch the full episodes on playback and also clips from the show that we do each week. So follow us there. Furthermore, we are now on Substack. I am so excited about this. Substack is easy to use, easy to follow, really fun to navigate. As you can see here, you can also click a link to our live and pre-recorded shows and video clips and also our audio podcast. And you can subscribe for free. I'm not charging yet. I may charge for some specialized content, but you can find us at dansmolin.substack.com. One more thing I want to add. If you like what you are seeing and hearing here on What's Your Work Fit, tell 5 friends to subscribe to us. And that's how we're going to extend this community of forward-thinking talent and managers and leaders who want to make work a wonderful part of the day, doing other wonderful things and not the all-consuming time suck of a day. That's a work fit. Okay, let's get to it. It is my absolute pleasure to bring back to What's Your Work Fit our guest today, Billee Howard. How you doing, Billee?
I'm great. Good to see you, Dan.
It is so good to see you. You know, Billee was on our second What's Your Work Fit back in 2022.
Wow.
And yeah, a lot has happened since then. We're going to talk about that.
Yeah, I can't believe it's been that long.
It absolutely has been. We're getting into a really interesting topic today, Billee. And before I bring up the slide, I want to tee up 2 elements of it.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to talk about Agile employees. We're also going to talk about emotional intelligence, or EQ. So just for familiarity purposes, let's talk about Agile employees and what they are. They possess adaptability, flexibility, and the ability to quickly adjust to changing situations and requirements, and also foster a proactive and resilient approach to the work that they do. Pairing that with EQ, emotional intelligence, which is the ability to understand and manage one's own emotions, as well as to understand and influence the emotions of others. So with that in mind, let's get to our question today, Billee. And we're going to ask you, how do I leverage Agile employee emotional intelligence? Get us started.
Well, thanks for the setup, Dan. Just to take a step back, what we do at BRANDThrō, which is the company I founded and I'm the CEO of, we're the only company in the world who's able to score human emotion. And we do that using AI. It's one ingredient in our cake, but we use other disruptive technologies, data science, and most importantly, direct human feedback to understand specifically and precisely how people feel from a primary and secondary emotional point of view about whatever stimuli we're putting in front of them. In this case, it would probably be things related to employer brand. It would be related to things, that have to do with employee experience. So as the fight for talent continues, and there's all of the struggles that you talk about on a day-to-day basis about the changing workforce and really what is going to be the future career path or what the future of careers look like in the future, many companies are thinking about research differently on a broad level with whoever their stakeholders are, and they come to us to understand agilely how people are feeling. So no different than there was agile technology and then there was agile marketing. We have invented what's called agile emotional intelligence, which can be applied to any key stakeholder group that a company is trying to reach. In this case, what we'll be talking about today is how do you understand how your employees and potential employees are feeling so that you can craft employer brands and experiences that engage people on an emotional level, because the only way you're going to trigger people to action, to be loyal to you, to trust you, is by understanding how they feel. And that is a massive white space that exists in the marketplace today that BRANDThrō seeks to fill.
So you and I have geeked out on brand data for quite a long time. It's one of my favorite things. And I have become very familiar over the years with how the reputational aspects of brands impact consumers.
Mm-hmm.
But you were forward thinking in looking at how brands relate to the people that work for them.
Mm-hmm.
So how does leveraging Agile employee emotional intelligence create better workplaces, and to that end, better brands?
Well, it's a great question. I mean, the whole idea is predicated on, if you have an ability to have agile customer intelligence, you have an ability to, in as near real time as possible, understand how people are feeling, which is something that changes, especially in this environment. People don't feel one given way at any given time, and there have been no tools to date. Sentiment analysis, social listening, those are things that even AI that's trained on large language models, they're trying to extrapolate from information that's already out there, how people are feeling, as opposed to directly asking them how they feel. So when it comes to the use case of agile intelligence with employees, it's really all about deconstructing what is the brand that you want to present to the world, and how do you want to bring it to life internally so that you can have the ultimate advocates for the brand and itself externally, because that's ultimately what the power of agile emotional intelligence and insights is all about. It's democratizing intelligence across an organization in ways that make employees receptive to being a part of the culture, increasing their knowledge base, and ultimately using that to make better decisions that lead to better outcomes, not only for themselves, but for the customers of a corporation.
I don't think most people, certainly not the viewers of this show a year ago, would have had any consciousness around the idea of agile employees. But beginning in March of last year, with the advent of OpenAI's platform and everything that followed by the hour, I think we're at a point now where we recognize Agile employees become more agile when they get better at using agentic AI, certainly the AI platforms that are in the workplace. What's been the experience from your standpoint on the AI element of this all? And how does that factor into the insights that you're gathering?
Well, it's a great question. I mean, we've been working with AI for 5 years. I was a futurist at IBM, 6 or 7 years ago, which is how I first learned of AI and started playing around with it. So, it's, as I like to say, it's one ingredient in our cake. I unfortunately think, and I've talked about it extensively, that there's been a lot of AI washing going on. You've heard the term greenwashing, when people double down on sustainability and don't actually do anything about it. There's been a similar unfortunate revolution related to AI, where companies are simply saying that they're using AI to spike their earnings, or because that's the buzzword and thing to do. And I'm very, very cautious about how people are talking about things. And we're very specific and have strong intentionality about saying that AI is one ingredient in our cake, along with other disruptive technologies. But most importantly, AI, it does not exist in isolation. There's always human direct feedback in what we do. There's a lot of talk about synthetic data, using data that's supposed to behave as people. And quite frankly, there will be a day of reckoning where AI is certainly the future. There are specific use cases for it. But in my opinion, there's never going to be a day that humanity will entirely be replaced by artificial intelligence, even if, the state of artificial general intelligence is predicted to happen by next year. I'm a little skeptical about that.
Well, and skepticism is healthy. AI doesn't have a heart. It can't do heart-centered work. It tends to hallucinate. I love that term. It tends to hallucinate and come up with things that are totally not actionable.
And not accurate, right? It's not accurate.
And not accurate, for sure. I want to get to a couple of viewer questions that we got before we went on the air. Okay. I'm going to start with Nicole, who asks, who says, our workplace is distributed. Some are in the headquarters, others are elsewhere. How do we overcome not being all in one place to achieve agile employee emotional intelligence?
Oh, it's a great question. I think that we need to take a step back. And while employees themselves need to be agile, the insights that we produce certainly help that to occur. But we're not talking about using our insights to actually make workforces more agile. What we're talking about is using our agile emotional intelligence to make companies be able to understand what matters most to their employees, so they can build better cultures, they can build better experiences, they can offer and create workplaces and jobs that people actually want to be a part of and fill. So it's insights that are actionable to create an employer brand that aims to attract and retain like-minded talent and build a culture, regardless of if you're all in the same location, which is not a reality in many large global organizations. There's still a very, very strong feeling of sameness and unity in some of the top organizations in the world who practice agile emotional intelligence and use those insights to knit together cohesive cultures that are rooted in empathy and ultimately bring people together, irregardless of location and distance.
I want to ask you about empathy, because it's been tarred and feathered by a few people in the past 2 weeks. I don't quite understand that. I mean, you should have empathy for the people you work with. I mean, you may not agree with them, but empathy can go a long way to creating better understanding and cohesion. I want to ask, I want to ask you about the retention part, which you just mentioned. I don't hear C-suites talking enough about that. Talent are very expensive to hire. I mean, I spent 20 years in recruitment had a boutique agency. I'm fully aware of what my clients paid me in fee to find their new best person.
Mm-hmm.
But I still don't hear enough talk about retention and about the lifetime value of people. Any thoughts as to the immediate benefit of emotional intelligence around agile employment towards creating longer, more satisfying tenures in the workplace?
It's a great question. I mean, I think unfortunately, perhaps one of the reasons that you're not hearing CEOs or the C-suite articulate what you just said
Right.
is not necessarily because it's not an issue. I just think that they're so overwhelmed with the notion of loss of loyalty and retention of customers, right? So people are thinking first about, why has my business changed so much since COVID? I invested all of this money to digitally transform. I've done X, I've done Y, I've done Z. But in reality, the most simplistic way of understanding what happened as a result of the pandemic in most sectors is that convenience in a consumer mindset usurps loyalty. And in many B2B and professional services and financial services spaces and places, there's so much commoditization that it's a sea of sameness, and it's very difficult to stand out. So when people come to us to solve for those issues, it's because of we're injecting this variable that hasn't existed before, an ability to predict how people are going to feel so that we can understand how they're going to act, how much trust is engendered when you say one thing to one person versus another, or show them one thing versus another, how authentic someone is behaving or being made to feel, and ultimately, how loyal is someone going to be to you? Everything comes down to different emotional calculations that our scoring does. For example, when you look at loyalty in particular, if you put something in front of an employee related to values or their career, different statements related to their job description or career ascension plan or what the company's overall purpose is, and you see that they select secondary emotions that are related to being valued, respected, and admired, it's a proven scientific fact that if you can make a customer feel that way, let alone an employee feel that way, you're going to engender loyalty. So as opposed to sending out customer satisfaction surveys that don't really tell you anything, or employee satisfaction surveys that are open-ended and don't tell you anything, because a yes or a no doesn't really tell you enough to make the decisions and actions that are required to solve for the type of issues you're talking about, whether it's a customer or an employee. That's why things are changing. And the last thing that I'll say to punctuate, to go back to the beginning, is the companies have spent billions and billions of dollars to digitally transform, and they spent little, if any, dollars to update their means of understanding their customers and their employees. And there's a pivotal point taking place right now where they realize that the steps, the data, whatever it is you want to talk about it, old traditional means of collecting the type of information required to optimize these experiences for customers and employees need to change. And that's why, solutions like I'm talking about that we offer at BRANDThrō, even though they're disruptive to the norm, disruption is required right now, whether you're talking about loyalty inside the organization or out.
Okay, so why is that happening? Why are C-suites not focused on this the way they should be? What's going on?
Well, quite frankly, I think there are so many other problems going on that I think there's an enormous amount of fatigue. As I said, they've spent all this money on transformation, and now they're flooded with a million different environmental factors that are out of their control. Everyone is like, well, what are you doing with AI? How is this going to improve your bottom line? They don't understand the impact on employees because I quite frankly, I just think that their minds, it's very difficult to get any C-suite executive to focus on anything right now because the combination of world events, the deluge of AI that we really don't understand what's happening and how to actually use it ourselves. That people are very, very overwhelmed. I would also say that, and I don't want to have a political conversation, but the rollback of DEI issues, which were centered around, yes, very specific issues related to employee experience, but that's a very big statement that if the government is saying that DEI is a bad word, that unfortunately has a trickle-down effect into the overall, I think, state of C-suite worrying about issues related to employee experience. It's a sad reality, but I think it's a byproduct of the environment. I don't think it's because people don't care.
Because they're worried more about tariffs and regulatory issues and disruption in the supply chain, I would imagine.
Absolutely. And they're also every time that somebody puts out their earnings, if they mention AI, their stock goes through the ceiling, regardless of if there's a use case or an ROI on that comes out of that. So those people have to figure out what to do because they've overpromised and their stock is going to suffer if they underdeliver. And then there's a host of other people who have no idea what they're doing still. So they need to figure that out. So unfortunately, I think that there's a lot of things that are trumping taking care of employees. And I think people are also fatigued of talking about the return to work conversation because it's been going on for, several years and people are just fatigued from it.
We've talked a lot about the C-suite, and let's face it, they are a bright, shining target to hit. Does the work you do get pedal to the metal more often on teams, from leaders to people on teams? I would imagine leaders are probably the most concerned about the attributes that you're describing because they have to make sure work's getting done well, that their people are doing well, that they retain over a long period of time. And I've spoken to leaders who are really thinking about the ROI of their workplace experience. Are people staying? Are they retaining? Are they staying to get promoted? Are they finding a work fit that allows them to have some semblance of a life away from the office or away from work? What are your thoughts on that?
Listen, I think that people whose job it is to focus on these things, whether it's chief people officers or it's those in HR or recruiting or whatever, those people are obviously continually trying to figure out how to use different tools or platforms like ours to better understand how people are feeling so that they can cater to them in ways that either incentivize them to stay a part of an organization, join an organization, and be happy where they are. I think to your point, leaders in marketing at least are investing in agile emotional intelligence of customers so that they can arm their people. It's the democratization of insights. They can arm their people with the knowledge that's required for them to be able to make better decisions that they feel good about. And they're empowered to then serve their customers themselves in ways that, hopefully make them feel as if they're being purposeful and contributing to the bottom line. Unfortunately, not enough leaders have the clarity of focus to do that right now. And I think that there's a lot of churn in organizational structure and responsibility taking place at the highest levels, particularly in marketing and a couple of other areas that, there's really no uniformity out there. And that's a problem because there's no best practice.
So I think I mentioned this once to you before. I mean, we both came out of an agency-like experience at some point in our careers. I spent the first 15 years toiling in the agency space, ad agency space. What I can tell you and tell the audience is that I often benefited from the most career advancements in the worst possible economic conditions. And why was that? Because clients recognized they needed our help. And by extension, I got the benefit of working on some really great brands and campaigns. So I bring that up because I wonder, in this environment in which we are in right now in early 2025, with a lot of political tumult and panic about tariffs and uncertainty about the stock market. I mean,
Everything, pretty much.
I watch the market every day. I'm an investor. How do we create a value frame for companies, for brands, that gets them to see the light, if you will, and break through all the other things that they're focused on right now? And you made the point, their attention is being drawn away by shiny objects and other things right now. But the work that you are centered on is truly important. It stabilizes companies. It helps companies create better value. You got happy people. You got people that are aligned with the purpose of what you're trying to do. Great things happen. And to that end, that helps scale more profits. That helps create more brand reach, more brand penetration. Mm-hmm. Any thoughts on and especially as informed from the scoring that you get and the insights from that scoring that you get? What should we be telling company leaders, brand leaders to consider?
Well, I think that, I can comment on some overall trends that are definitely driving the landscape that we've gleaned from our own work in Agile, emotional customer intelligence, which obviously could be carried over to employees, because I believe that employees are customer number one. If your employees aren't satisfied, then I don't see how your customers are ever going to be satisfied. But putting that aside, to the end of what you were talking about, we've seen a lot of brands try to come out too strong from an aspirational point of view. And when we tested and scored emotionally how different audiences inside the organization and out felt currently about overly aspirational messaging, it's very, very interesting that while from a primary emotional point of view, we saw some positive responses. We have 6 primary emotions. There's love, joy, surprise, sadness, anger, and fear. Those are the standard primary emotions. So if somebody, for example, let's say, found an aspirational corporate narrative, let's say they've had a lot of joy around it and our score showed them that. When we then asked them to select as many secondary emotions as they wanted, and we've selected 12, I mentioned some of them: disappointed, pensive, valued, admired, whatever. If we are able to see that when we compare the primary emotional score with the secondary emotional score, and there's a large delta between those two scores, we understand that that's a false sense of joy, because there's tension that's underlying how they feel primarily. And we've seen that happen in almost every industry, inside and out of companies. So what I mean by that, or what the takeaway from that is, very broadly, since we've seen a lot of different use cases, people don't believe anything that anybody says currently. It's unfortunate for a variety of reasons that there is a reason. I hate the phrase because it's overused, but we do live in an era of mistrust. It's been compounded by the dissolution of the media, what's going on in government, and the actions of a variety of organizations haven't really helped either. So what people are seeking right now is not the just do it of the corporate world. They're seeking something that gives them hope and a sense of optimism that's rooted in authenticity. And if I were to tell any CEO or chief people officer or whoever who's in charge of crafting an employer brand, those are the types of insights that I would suggest that they lean into, and we could test and measure how to bring that to life. But that's what people are hoping for right now is, pun intended, a sense of hope, a sense of optimism, not an overpromise, not an ability to feel disappointed and have somebody underdeliver again. And I think that says quite a bit, and it leads with an ability to do exactly what you said a lot of people don't do, which is be empathetic. And being empathetic, people don't understand the difference between sympathy and empathy. Sympathy means you can feel, bad for somebody. Empathy actually is demonstrating that you understand how it feels to walk in somebody else's shoes, and that you're giving them a lifeline, a partnership, something that they can believe in and believe in realistically. And I think that's what our current environment is seeking from an emotional level, from a storytelling level, from a corporate reputation level, whether it's an employer brand or an external brand, that's the tenor that the market is expecting right now. And I don't think people are necessarily delivering on that.
You bring up the impact on news media. I mean, you and I have been watching that unravel for 40 years. I mean, we don't trust our news gathering institutions.
Sadly, no.
And we live in a country where there's no Venn diagram overlap between opposing sides of the aisle.
Mm-hmm.
The news they watch, the news we watch, vice versa, doesn't necessarily intersect, and the values that are described don't necessarily intersect. That's a very tricky place for a virtue signaling brand to be, either on one side of the aisle or not.
Mm-hmm.
Without mentioning brands, there's a big box store company that went whole into DEI, and in the current environment, they got slapped down, and now they have taken away all those messages, those supporting messages that were there a year ago. That gives consumers whiplash.
And employees as well.
Yeah. Right? I mean, it's just really, really tough. And I don't like the term virtue signaling, but I've seen a lot of it with companies that are afraid, have fear of missing out and want to try to, get ahead of the zeitgeist, if you will. But like you said, Billy, if the prevailing mood is joy or something like it, but then when you dig down secondarily, and there's all these negative attributes that, the store you like to shop in their commercials are all joyful, but then when you go to customer service and you have this really horrible experience, that's a horrible disconnect that impacts the store's revenues and consumer perception of that brand.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's no different than why, people are not spending right now because they don't have any confidence or trust in the environment, period. So, if you don't instill confidence, the only way you can instill confidence is by instilling trust. And there is no trust, unfortunately, in the environment today. And that's why people need to work really, really hard to figure out what they deliver on a promise of trust, because there is no one size fits all model of, oh, you're company X and you're in this business, so this is the solution for you. That's not how it works, unfortunately, as you well know.
I talked to you a long time ago about my wife, the work that my wife and I do, side hustling a vintage clothing and accessories business. And we've been doing it a very long time. We actually started it in your vacation community out in the Hamptons. And back in the day, we were selling big high ticket items, but I can tell you as of 2 weeks ago at an outdoor show we did, we were not, we were selling, but we were selling, comparatively speaking, trinkets, rings, brooches, things like that. And it harkens back, Billy, to something that I'm sure you're familiar with, an idea that the late Len Lauder described about his own business, which is in times of economic peril, women in particular may be more predisposed to buy a lipstick, which is a small luxury that doesn't cost a lot, but it makes them feel better.
Yes, you mentioned that. I saw you posted about that the other day.
And it's backed up by data that MPD Group has done over the years. We may be back into that kind of small luxury, make me feel better about the current situation that we're in milieu.
I think so. I think that, one trend that we're seeing as well is the premiumization of specific types of alcohol. So there's a lot of pushback, as you probably imagine, that a lot of people have decided suddenly that they're not criticizing them, that they're into health and wellness and they're not drinking at all. Where there's another category of people that if they're going to buy a bottle of bourbon or whiskey, they're willing to think about that as a luxury item. And, instead of maybe going out to a show or doing this or traveling, they're willing to spend $200 on a bottle of bourbon. It's not as cheap as lipstick, but it's the same idea. So I think the premiumization of different things that were once commoditized at lower price points, I think that's an excellent point. And it has a tremendous amount to do with companies not understanding that people only are going to purchase, not just now, just in general, around things that bring them joy. And the CMO of MasterCard dubbed this an economic movement called Passionomics. Ooh. So when people actually don't understand, or they say, why do you care about how people feel? Well, I care about how they feel, because you can't possibly understand what somebody is going to do or how you're going to get them to buy from you, work for you, be loyal to you, if you're simply looking at data that is based off of what they did in the past, not how they feel and what they're going to do in the future. And that's what I'm focused on with my team at BRANDThrō, which, as I said, has massive implications on different use cases, but certainly this notion of helping with EX.
I think the extension of brand value last really hit me 5 years ago this time, when we were all cloistered in place, if you will, during the early days of the pandemic. And we were relying on certain things more than ever. And we were perhaps then really focused on the positive brand extensions that came from it. Netflix, right?
Tiger King.
What's that?
I said, yeah, you would have never caught me watching the Tiger King if it wasn't during the pandemic.
Right. Netflix and other streaming platforms. And certainly side hustled companies that were making things in the moment that were bringing people joy. My wife sold a lot of merchandise on live TV shows on merchandise platforms during the pandemic. And what she said to me was, I think we're making a connection with people at their most vulnerable time. What we're selling is not expensive, but there's always a story about something that I'm selling and it's resonating with our customers that makes them feel good.
Yeah, well, I think that also the fact that you guys do vintage stuff and your wife's focus is on that. That's where the nostalgia movement came from, is out of the pandemic, for a hope for feeling the times of old when things were more simplistic and we weren't all locked in our homes, staring at our phones and being miserable. So, there's something to that emotional through line that probably resonated as well.
And therein lies the lesson, I think, Billee, and the opportunity that I think leaders and companies have with working with a company like BRANDThrō, because there is a really strong value to working with constituencies at their most vulnerable, be they consumers or hired talent.
Sure.
So,
I agree.
Well, we've kind of run through a really great show today, Billee, and it's been an absolute joy bringing you back. Before we get to asking you the last question,
okay,
I want you to point our viewers and listeners to you and your company, to where they can learn more about you, more about BRANDThrō, and perhaps to engage in a conversation to perhaps something that might help them long term. Where can they find you?
Sure. Well, I'm very active on LinkedIn. It's Billee Howard, easy to find. You can also visit our website, which is BRANDThrō.ai. And, there's a variety of different layers on the website, but there's a particular link where you can click to learn more, to see the tech in action, which is probably very helpful. And you can also directly message me, and I'd be happy to talk to anyone who has any questions or wants to learn more about all the good stuff we were talking about today.
The tools on your website are excellent, and I would recommend to anybody listening and viewing today to check it out because it's terrific. Well done, Billee. Okay, we're at our last question, but a tee up about it. We asked you this back in October of 2022.
Oh, no.
So we're going to revisit what you said.
Okay. Oh.
So the question we're going to ask you today is, or ask you again, is what's your work fit? What attribute, condition, experience, place, or state of mind brings you place or state of mind makes the work that you do a wonderful part of your day, doing many wonderful, meaningful things, and not the all-consuming time suck of a day. And before we ask you for your answer, Billee, we want to revisit what you said on our live show along with Danielle Farage back in October of 2022. Here we go. Billee, what's your work fit?
Well, I have 3 non-negotiables as well. They come from probably a different perspective since I'm a little bit older, I think, than Danielle. So I left corporate America for many reasons. Mostly it was, the fact that I felt my ability to innovate and create was stifled by a hierarchy that didn't necessarily always want to accept what they called maverick ideas. So that's why I left agency life and, wrote the book, WeCommerce, and it led me on a whole new path to build the technology company that I'm building today, which is BRANDThrō. But the 3 non-negotiables of people that work with me and around me are as follows. You have to be kind. You have to be very intelligent and know your craft, and as well as know your craft, know as much what you don't know as what you do know, because there's nothing worse than a jack of all trades, a master of none. That's extremely frustrating. But most importantly, every single person that works with me, all we do every day, some more than others, is laugh. And if you do not enjoy not only what you do, but who you do it with, you are doing a massive disservice to yourself because, laughter is critical to any success, whether that's business or personal. And, I think it's something we all deserve and should definitely chase after.
Your emphasis on kindness and laughter resonates with me. Does that stay the same, or would you change it in any way?
No, I have to say that, even though the world has changed and unfortunately become a less kind and happy place since we had that conversation, I'm happy to say that, at work every day with the people that I work with, everyone is very kind. We do laugh a lot. And, in very difficult times like we're in right now, you have to have two other things that I think are important to remember, and that's, you have to have a very strong passion for what you do. And that will buoy you in good times and bad, as well as understanding, are you an entrepreneur or are you not? Because I've had to reconcile that and reckon with that a bit over the last 2 years, because the economy has not been very, very strong, as we all know. Right. But at the end of the day, the kindness and the happiness goes hand in hand with having an ability to wake up every day and do what I love the way that I want to do it in a company that I get to build with people who are like me. And, those are 2 other important things that I would add since we last spoke. Having said that, I liked what I said the first time, but
I do too.
I repeat it.
I do too. I loved what you had to say about your own work fit. Billee Howard, this has been wonderful. We love having you on. You are a terrific friend and a phenomenal resource. And I do hope that our viewers and listeners will take the time to go check you out and check out BRANDThrō. Thank you so much for being on the live show. One more question. Can we get you back on at some future point?
Always want to be on with you, Dan, and to talk about somebody who's extremely kind and who always makes me laugh. I would be, remiss if I didn't tell you, how your little notes and check-ins sometimes when I'm having a hard day or going through something difficult really make a difference. So it's not only who you work with directly every day, it's who you surround yourself with, who are kind and funny and sweet. And you're one of those very special people. So thank you for being that for me. And I'm so glad that your show has continued to thrive, and it would be my honor and privilege to be on whenever you'd like.
Terrific. Thank you, Billee.
All right. Thanks so much.